Well, all right, guys, we are getting closer and closer to Sonic Frontiers releasing, and I couldn't be more pumped. And, well, if you were to look at my last video, it got a lot of views, and I was kind of shocked because I've done Sonic content before, but it usually doesn't get a lot of views. So I was happily surprised, and with that, we had a whole bunch of new subscribers be added to the channel. And with Sonic Frontiers on the horizon, I thought that with those things combined, having all these new subscribers and this new game coming out, that I wanted to kind of release my top 5 list of Sonic the Hedgehog games. Pretty much the reason is so that you can kind of see into me as a fan. I always find them kind of fun, and I've never really sat down and tried to figure out which ones are my favorite. And so I'm super pumped to dive into this thing. And again, I want to say this is my top 5 list, so if you disagree, that's totally cool. And I would actually be curious what your top 5 are. Leave it in the comment section down below. There isn't like a wrong or right answer because it's all personal preference. I also think in the era you grew up in will highly change the list that you have based on the games that you grew up playing and when you were first introduced to Sonic. And so there's like the Boost era of people who grew up with those games. There's the Adventure era, which is people like me, and then there's like the Classic era, which are like the retro, the old geezer Sonic fans. But with that being said, I wanted to share my top 5 list with you guys, and so I hope you enjoy my thoughts on these games. So first off, I just wanted to do some honorable mentions of some games that didn't make the list, that were hard to not put on the list. But if I was honest, I was like, I can't take out any of the games that are in the top 5 and replace them with these. But there are a few games that I really enjoy that I don't feel like get enough credit, especially there's 2 of them that really come to mind. And so one of those is Sonic Riders. It's a racing game from Sonic that isn't like any other racing game I've ever played. It's super unique where you're on these like hoverboards with these tech and you're riding these like airwaves. And it was a ton of fun. It released around the 15th anniversary, and it's something that I actually find that a lot of people in the Sonic fan community who've actually been able to pick this game up really enjoy it, because it's not just like another kart racer. It's not ripping off Mario Kart. It's doing its completely own separate thing, and it was a ton of fun. And I remember playing it like crazy as a kid. And now as an adult, I've gone back to it, and I didn't realize how hard it is, that there's actually a ton of skill required for you to be able to play this game well, and it is a blast. And so if you've never checked out Sonic Riders, you totally should. It's a ton of fun. And then another underrated game that I absolutely love is Sonic Advanced for the Game Boy Advance. This game was really the first memory I have of a 2D Sonic game that I played, and I loved it. I would stay up late playing my Game Boy. I'd hide it under the covers while I would play it late at night so my parents couldn't see. When they would enter my room, I'd like close it quickly. I loved this game, and I would play this game everywhere, on the school bus, at school, at home, going on family trips. It was one of my favorite games to play on the Game Boy, and it's incredibly underrated. As far as 2D Sonic games go, in my opinion, it's one of the best. And if you've never been able to play it, you've never checked it out, I highly recommend it. It is so well done. And then my last honorable mention is a really great game. It's Sonic Generations. And pretty much the only reason this game didn't make the list is the story, I feel like, is really weak, and it kind of let me down because it was in that era of Sonic when the stories were kind of rough. But it's a celebration game of all of the years of Sonic leading up to that point. And so they redid a bunch of levels with the boost formula and with 2D Sonic, and it was incredible. It was so much fun. It was one of those games that when it released, I was actually like so excited to be able to go back to these remastered levels that were completely redone, completely rethought for this game. And so it's often one that I recommend to people if they're like, what should I play to get into Sonic? I often recommend this one because it's such a celebration of all the best things about him leading up to that point, that it's a great starting point. It's tons of fun. It's one of the best, and it sadly just barely fell off the cut, and so it's not in the top 5 for me, but it definitely is one of the greatest games that he's ever made. So with that, let's actually dive into my top 5, and we will start with number 5, and that one is Sonic 3 and Knuckles. And so I'm putting both these games together because they were originally supposed to be together, but they chose to just kind of delay them a bit to make sure they were done well. And this, to me, is prime 2D Sonic, that it doesn't get better than Sonic 3 and Knuckles. The level design is incredible. I think it's the peak of 2D Sonic, and I don't think it's actually been matched, not even in Sonic Mania. As much as I love Sonic Mania, I think this is the best it's ever been done. I actually love the different sprites and how they're a little bit more detailed. I really like the unique art design it has as compared to the other 2D games. And the music done by Michael Jackson is incredible. And yes, it's a worst kept secret that Sega probably has, that Michael Jackson did the music. And it is phenomenal. The tracks that they were able to throw out are insane. And then you're able to play as all these different characters for the first time. And this was the first time there was like a save file. And so it was really revolutionary for the franchise. But when it comes down to it, this game is a ton of fun. And honestly, for me, I don't love a lot of the 2D Sonic games. I don't think they're bad. They're just like not my favorite ones. But this one found its way on the list because I genuinely have so much fun every time I turn on this game. And if you didn't know, these games are the basis for the Sonic the Hedgehog 2 movie story. And so, of course, it's like sprites and stuff. So there's not like a crazy story, but there's enough of a story that you can keep up with that actually I find really good. The whole story of Knuckles and him starting out as bad guy, being tricked by Eggman, and then realizing what happened, and then joining Sonic's team. It was such a good story, such a great game, so much fun. It's the best, in my opinion, that 2D Sonic ever was, and so that's why it made it into the top 5 spot for me. And coming in at number 4, we have Sonic Heroes. And this game is really underrated, in my opinion. It was the first time that Sonic was on all the platforms and not just on a Sega console. And I think they knocked it out of the park. It really went back to the basics of what the character is, focusing on his friends, just chasing Dr. Eggman, having a more lighthearted adventure, and being able to just play as a variety of characters, but not having to splice them all up like they did in Sonic Adventure, that you can do different kind of modes all in one level. And that's one of the things I like the most about it, is I grew up in that adventure era where I was so obsessed with the lore and Sonic's friends and all the different characters they had, and to have them all come together in this game and have so many, I find it so unique. And even the way that they handled the level design, where you've got kind of a normal, a hard mode, an easy mode, and then a mode that's completely different than all the others, in the different teams that you get to play as, whether it's Sonic Team, Dark Team, the Chaotic Team, the Rose Team, you name it. You're able to have all these different level designs and different experiences. And honestly, the levels themselves are a ton of fun, that I always have a blast putting this thing on. And it's got its own issues, it's got its own bugs, but honestly, it's one of the best Sonic games that they've ever made. It's always a ton of fun. There are some things that don't move it forward on the list, like it's more buggy than the other games on this list. The story isn't as deep as the other ones, and so it's not as compelling. As much as I enjoy the story, there wasn't like a ton of story to be there. And then I really didn't like the health bar thing that they introduced here. When it came to enemies, it's just not something that me, as a video game player, that I've liked, when enemies have those health bars like that. I understand why they did it, because you have different teammates who have different levels of power, but it was one of the things that was like, oh, I gotta beat up this like huge thing, and I've got all these little ones running around. And it wasn't as entertaining as I usually would like it to be. But overall, I love this game. It was the last we had of my favorite voice cast, which was the Adventure era voice cast, because that's who I grew up listening to. And it was a really solid entry when Sonic had to shift from being just a Sega franchise to now being on multi-platforms. And coming in at number 3, and this honestly surprised me, but the more I thought about it, the more I had to put this here at number 3, and that's Sonic Unleashed. This game is really underrated, and when it came out, it wasn't received very well, which is too bad, because in hindsight, this game's actually really solid. Now, I'm going to get the bad out of the way, and I'm someone who doesn't really like beat 'em up kind of games. It's why I don't actually like God of War, even though I think the story and the graphics and everything is great, and I understand why people like it. I just don't like that kind of a game where you're just like beating people up. And so the Werehog levels drained on me like crazy. I really do not enjoy them. I do not like the Werehog levels. I get what they were going for, and I get that some people do like it, but just for me personally, that's not a kind of gameplay that I'm really into, and so I always find those to be a chore that I have to play through to get to the parts of the game that I do like. But boy oh boy, when you get to that part of the game that I do like, it's incredible, and that's why it's put on this list. Is the daytime levels are an insane amount of fun. And honestly, it is the best that the boost formula ever was. It was incredible. And it wasn't just like linear paths like they kind of did in something like Forces, where it was so linear that it wasn't fun, that it still had that adventure feel. But it was with this new style of gameplay and all the different ways that you could use it and learn how to master that formula was awesome. And then on top of that, the music is incredible and the story is actually really good and the voice cast did amazing. This was the peak for this voice cast, where they were all like excelling in their voices, and they really felt like they came into their characters. And on top of that, it's crazy to think about this, but this is still the best looking Sonic game we've had till now. That there hasn't been one that actually looks more gorgeous and well designed as this one, which is incredible to say, but it is the case. This game is beautiful. It looks awesome, and he has never looked better. And so just overall, this game is really solid. Those daytime stages, I'm telling you, if you've never played a Sonic Unleashed daytime stage, man, you are missing out. This game is so much fun. It's unreal how much fun Unleashed was, and it's actually mind-boggling to think that this wasn't really well received initially, because I think in hindsight we have come to realize that this game is a hidden gem. It's really fun. There are some things about it that I don't like, but the things that are good about it are so incredibly good that it outshines all of the negatives that it might have. And then coming in at number 2, and this was really hard to figure out which one of these games was going to be number 1 and which was going to be number 2, but at the end of the day, if I had to pick one game that I had for the rest of my life, I knew which one I would pick, and it sadly wasn't this one. And so coming in at number 2 is Sonic Adventure. This game is incredible. Sonic made the jump from 2D to 3D, and he did it in a way that outshines so many others. When you think about it, this is one of the most ambitious games that Sonic Team has ever made, and the fact they were able to pull it off is actually kind of a miracle when you think about it, especially when you think about like Mario 64, which is a great game, and then you look at Sonic Adventure and you just look at the differences and you see the amount of effort they put into Adventure and the amount of new things they were trying. It's pretty incredible how they pulled it off. There's an incredible story that has all these interweaving parts and all these different playable characters, and all of their stories intertwine with one another to tell a full story, which is incredibly hard to write and incredibly hard to pull off, but it pulls it off, and it pulls it off well. There's multiple different styles of gameplay, whether you're playing Sonic, whether you're playing Knuckles, Tails, Big the Cat, you name it. They have all these different styles of gameplay that are unique to each character and that are all a ton of fun, except for Big. But once you figure out how to actually play Big, it's super easy. The hardest part is figuring out how to actually fish. But other than that, all the other modes are incredible. The music is insane. It launched the kind of attitude that Sonic would have when it came to music and really changed it with that kind of rock and roll style, and Crush 40 bringing it, and all the different styles of music that every character and every level feels like it has its own unique sound. It's really, really well done, and it's crazy that they pulled it off. And then at the end of the day, yeah, the game is just a ton of fun, where it's got all these incredible things to see, like voice acting, like full-on voice acting for every single character. And it's got this crazy music, and it's got all these different ways to play. But then at the end of the day, like, the game is so much fun. And yeah, if you jump back to it now, you're going to have to adjust a bit, because it was one of the first 3D games. And so sometimes the characters don't always move the way that you would want them to. And sometimes when Sonic is running really fast, he can be difficult to control, and not have him just screw up and lose his momentum. But once you're able to get past those things and be able to look at this game as it is, this is one of the greatest games that Sonic has ever produced. It's one of the most fun. It's a game that people are constantly calling for them to come back to, that this style of game is what people have been dying to go back to for a while now. And then on top of that, tons of people are begging for a remake, that hopefully we would get something like a Ocarina of Time 3D remake for this thing, where we would be able to go back to this world, have it be completely remade, have the bugs worked out, have some of the things like Big's fishing fixed, and be able to enjoy this game the way it was fully intended to be. And so this game is incredible. It's awesome. It's a large part of my childhood, and that's why it's coming at number 2. And then, of course, at number 1, and this is probably not shocking to you if you've made it this far, it's Sonic Adventure 2, specifically Sonic Adventure 2 Battle, because that's the game that I played, and that's the experience that I had. And this game, like, what is there to say about it that hasn't already been said? Now let's get the bad out of the way. I'm not foolish, and honestly, Sonic Adventure is probably a more well-rounded game, but Sonic Adventure 2 is just my favorite. And if I had to pick one game that I would have for the rest of my life and could only play when it came to this franchise, it would be this one. But there are negatives. The treasure hunting, they did it a disservice. The treasure hunting in Adventure was really well done, where you had all 3 emeralds could tell you where they were at the same time. And in Adventure 2, they kind of changed it to make it longer, where you're only able to kind of sense where 1 emerald is at a time. And it's super annoying, and it makes the levels way more difficult than they need to be, and to a point where it's like it's not nearly as fun, and it can be frustrating. And so that kind of deteriorates it. And then the like mech levels, they're not bad, they just aren't that great, and you're always kind of dying to go to a Sonic or Shadow level. And so for that reason, that kind of pulls this game back a bit as far as being well-rounded. But man, just like Unleashed, once you get to those Sonic levels, once you get to those Shadow levels, it is a blast. That Sonic has never been as much fun in 3D as he is in Adventure 2. That the level design and the way he moves and the way he plays and how fluid he is and how they solved a lot of the problems from the first game is incredible. And then on top of that, you have, in my opinion, the greatest story that he's ever told, which I'm excited to see in the third Sonic the Hedgehog movie. But this is the like cream of the crop when it comes to Sonic stories. And yes, it's got its own issues and plot holes, but this is still the best story that they've ever told. It introduces to us a legendary character that for some people is more popular than the main character, which is Shadow. This is the game that brought us Shadow, and it's also the most well-rounded version of Shadow. And his arc, no pun intended, throughout this game is incredible. It's great storytelling, and he's a really compelling character. And then on top of that, the 2 Battle introduced to us multiplayer. And the multiplayer was so much fun. I have so many fond memories of playing multiplayer with my siblings growing up and my friends, that you would be able to race each other in the levels, that you'd be able to fight in mechs, you'd be able to do all these different things. That was an insane amount of fun. And so the replayability was just through the roof on this game, and it still is. I still pop this thing in and have an incredible time, either by myself playing through the levels or with others in the multiplayer. This game is one of the games that just completely shaped me as a gamer. And then on top of that, the music is insane. There are so many good songs that are from this game that will just stay in your head. Everybody knows Escape from the City, and that's because it's a banger. Everybody loves it. And I love it to the point that I made it the end song of every video that I've ever made. And I haven't even gotten to the Chow Garden. The Chow Garden is a game in itself, and it peaked here, and for some reason it disappeared and never returned. But the Chow Garden was so much fun, being able to like raise these chows in between each level you would play, and you go into levels and get things for your chow and take care of them and take them to school and feed them and try to unlock hell or heaven. It was so what a weird concept, but it was so much fun to be able to play that, because it was an idea in Sonic Adventure that was like, oh, this is an interesting idea. But what they did with it in Adventure 2 was so crazy that it honestly is a game in itself. And so many people have spent countless amounts of hours in the Chow Garden taking care of these chow. And you're like, what? This isn't even part of the main game, but it's so much fun. It's hard to explain unless you experience it for yourself. Just overall, this game is absolutely incredible. And I have no idea what the future of this franchise holds, but it seems like the future is pretty bright. I'm looking at Frontiers and hearing the stories and the early reactions that are coming from it, and it feels like we're finally getting back to this place of a Sonic Adventure 2, where we're having great story, great characters, great gameplay, and we're going to be able to have that incredible experience again of one of the greatest Sonic games of all time probably being released. And so I don't know if it'll bump anything out of this list, but I am incredibly looking forward to it. And that's the thing, is that almost every Sonic game, at least for my generation, gets compared to Sonic Adventure 2 Battle. And so that's why it deserves the number one spot. That's why it's the number one spot on my list. If I had to pick one Sonic game for the rest of my life that is the only one I could play, it would be this one. And this game, in my opinion, is a masterpiece. I love the thing to death. But I know that you probably don't agree with me, and that's totally cool. And I'm actually curious as to the games that would make your top 5 list. So please, genuinely, let me know in the comment section down below what games are in your top 5. I'm so curious, because for every fan, it's different, and it's different to hear the explanations as to why and what put them there for each fan. So I would love to be able to see your guys' list. Thank you for watching this. Thank you for subscribing, for liking, for commenting, all that stuff. Seriously, it was pretty crazy to see that video blow up. I wasn't expecting it at all. Again, like, the videos that I made of Sonic would only get like 200 views max. So it's super cool to see. I'm pumped for a bunch of you guys to hop on this community. So until next time, we will see you guys in the next one.